Hello and welcome to the Health Oddity Podcast, episode 193. Now, we've got a very, very special guest on with us today, and we're actually recording later than usual. We're recording in the evening, but Pete and I are both wide awake, and we're going to be kept awake by this man's energy, certainly, once we get going, because he's ready to go. He's ready to kind of start rolling. But I wanted to give a quick intro to begin with. So we are joined today by Mr. David Keohan, otherwise known as now Indiana Stones. How are you doing, David? You all right?
Sure, I couldn't be better, lads. It's great to talk to you again. And like we were saying, it's 2.5 years since we had the last chat. And
I
a lot has
know.
changed since then.
A lot has changed. So what I was going to say, if you have not listened, if you're, I know I say this every week, but I genuinely speak to people every single week who just start listening to the podcast. So David was on with us way back on episode 59. And it was an episode called "It's Never Too Late to Be a World Champion," in which we talk about kind of David's background in lots of detail and how he got into training and exercise and kettlebell sport and all that sort of thing. So we're not going to go kind of over that kind of origin story again in this episode. So if you've not met David before on the podcast, I'd really recommend that either listen to this one and go back to that one, or go back to that one now and then come back to this one. But that's episode 59. And like we said, that was 134 weeks ago, which is about 2.5 years ago since we've spoke to this man. But we did, since then, obviously, you came over to Unique Results, you came over to the gym and you did a great workshop with us, incorporating yoga and mobility and kettlebell sports. We met you in person. But since then, we touched on it last time, and you've really now gone into kind of this stone lifting research. You kind of find these Irish stones of strength. And you know, you've ran with this and have had huge media interest, you know, nationally and internationally, about this. So I suppose what I would really love to try and do with this podcast, David, is obviously hear all about what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Sure.
But also a lot of the people who maybe listen to this, it's Health Oddity. This is not a standard way of training, kind of lifting stones on the beach and in the fields and in the forests and things. But that's why we love it, because it's something different. And it's not a lot of the mainstream podcasts. People are training in gyms on machines or perfectly calibrated weights, or, you know, dumbbells, barbells, kettlebells, body weight, whatever. But this is something really kind of primitive and historic and raw, you know, which is so I suppose what I want us to try and get across is, for those people who do know you and are interested in this, to dive into it, but also for people who've never even thought about picking up stones or stone lifting, or don't even know what it is, to kind of get across what it is that you love about it and why it's so different and why it's so effective and why you love it as much as you do. You know what I mean? And hopefully, obviously, at the end of it, we'll get loads of people following you and following you in your journey who've never thought about it before. So, I mean, where do you want to kick off? You know, like kind of.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, when we were chatting last, we were talking about, I was listening back to the podcast actually today, just to get a flavor for where we were at the last time we were talking. And I was just back from a trip to Scotland. And I went over and I'd lifted the Clough the Stones of Strength over in Scotland. And I fell in love with the history of it, lads. It wasn't, the physicality of the movement is fantastic anyway. You know, it's a wonderful movement. But for me, it's the history part of it. It's the fact that it goes all the way back, sometimes pre-Christian. You know, you're lifting something that somebody had maybe lifted around the time of the birth of Christ, maybe before that, you know. And you're thinking to yourself when you're lifting these stones, how many people have come and gone, and how many people have put their hands on this before me, you know? So to me, it's tangible history. It's physical history. You know, you're not reading about it in a book, or you're not talking about it. You're going out and you're putting your hands on these things that people have lifted for hundreds and hundreds and possibly thousands of years, you know? So there's something quite beautiful about that. I fell in love with the whole, we talked about this the last time, about the documentary that Rogue made, about the culture of it in Scotland and in Spain and in Iceland. And I was thinking then, I was like, hold on a second. There's Scotland, right? There's Iceland. We're in the middle. How come there's nothing here? You know what I mean? Where's our culture of stone lifting, of historic stone lifting? So the more I delved into it and the more I thought about it, I was like, we can't just be that broken link in the chain. You know, we're so similar to the Scots and the Icelandic. And then going all the way back through history and through ratings and stuff, we're a very similar people, similar DNA. So it was like, there has to be something here. So when I came back and when I finished chatting to you guys, it was only a week, I think, after I came back the last time, I started seriously looking for the culture here. But then it's like, where do you start? You know what I mean? Nobody has spoken about it. There's nothing written down here about it, you know? So what I done was I typed in Irish stone lifting online. And as everyone does, you Google, what else do you want to do? You Google something. So I Googled Irish stone lifting, and I came across a story by a man called Liam O'Flaherty, who's a very famous Irish essayist and short story writer. And he had a short story called The Stone. Now, we learned, when we were in primary school and secondary school, we learned some of Liam O'Flaherty's stories. He's a very important part of our culture, you know? So we knew about him growing up. So it was like, hold on a second, this guy has a story called The Stone. And the story about the stone is about an old man lamenting his lost kind of virility and strength and youth, and about him revisiting this lifting stone on Inishmaan, which is an island off the west coast of Galway. And he remembers the greatest day in his life was when he was at a wedding, and out of all the strong men in this village, he was the only man who could pick this stone up. And the cheer from the islanders was something he could remember to this day. And I was like, that's an absolutely beautiful story. He goes back then, he tries to lift it. He's in his old age, he's in his 80s. He attempts to lift it, dies in the attempt. And at the funeral, the young men of the village take the culture back and start relifting the stone again. So in about 10 pages of a story, you have birth, death, how you deal with aging, the man dying, and then renewal. I mean, it's like, that's a fantastic short story. It's absolutely beautiful in about 10 pages. So it's like, that's gorgeous. Imagine if that stone was a real thing. So I started digging and I started researching. And sure enough, there's the great Peter Martin, who'll be the man who found the lifting stones in Scotland. He single-handedly brought the culture back up there. He was talking to a woman who lived on the island, a woman called Fiona. And Fiona said in a Reddit thread about 10 years ago now, because in fairness, Peter's dead about 5 or 6 years. But 10 years ago, Fiona said the story that Liam O'Flaherty wrote about is based on an actual stone. It's based on a culture that was very alive and thriving here on the Aran Islands, but has died out for the past 70 or 80 years. But the stone is still there. It's the one that Liam O'Flaherty wrote about. And it's on a little small pathway towards Port Vale on Doon in a place called Gurtnacoppin. So I was like, hold on a second now. Are you telling me that this story, that is this absolutely beautiful story of renewal and stuff, that there's an actual stone and it's based on reality? So I was like, that blew my mind. I was like, I have to go see this thing. So that weekend, we set the lads, two of my mates, hopped into a camper van, went to Galway and went over on the ferry over to Inishmore. And I went to Gurtnacoppin, which is a little small village on the east coast of the Aran Islands. And the Aran Islands, it's just rocks. It's just stone. The whole landscape is rocks. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of stones. It's like, how the hell am I going to know which stone is the fucking stone in a field of stone? You know what I mean? So it's like, I haven't got a hope. But look, we go down, we have a look. So I GPSed the area, and it was like, there's a track heading down towards this natural jetty, which is just actually under Dún Aengus, which is the oldest fort in Europe. Incredible place. And I was walking down this stone pathway, and I had the book with me. So I was following the book like a map. It said the man walked through a stone stile, and there he saw a little small garden. I was like, oh yeah, there's the stile, there's the garden. And I was like, and he sat down on a bench, there's the bench. And as he walked down towards the harbour, on the right-hand side, in a little patch of grass by itself, now there's no grass anywhere on the Aran Islands, but in this little patch of grass, and said the sunshine shone upon the particles of mica and the surface of the stone. So I was like, hold on a second, mica, that might be granite. So I'm walking down and I see this pink granite stone in a little patch of grass on the right-hand side of the path. And I was like, that has to be it. No, that has to be it. There's no two ways about it. It's the only pink stone in a field of grey limestone. It stands out. So we went over. I immediately kind of got an energy of this. Things like, that has to be it. And as I was heading back after finding it, I met a man giving a walking tour, and he was like, I said, excuse me, I said, do you know anything about the lifting stone down there? And he was like, oh, yeah, he said, I do. Yeah, that's the Mullane Port Vale on Doon. He said, that's the lifting stone of the Aran Islands. I was like, fuck me, that's it. That's it. He said, yeah, Liam O'Flaherty wrote about that one. He said, there's his house just there. His house is 100 yards away. And so he grew up beside that stone. And that's why he wrote the story about it. So because I knew it in my bones, because the way he wrote about the lifting of the stone, the physicality of it, the way the man bent down, the way he picked it up, the way he spat on his hands, the way he leaned over the stone, is exactly how I do it myself. It was like, that has to be a real thing. And then yet there it is, there it was. So that was the first lifting stone in Ireland found, which was a massive moment. I mean, it was huge. I mean, it was like following a fucking an old pirate's adventure map. You know what I mean? I found this stone through this old story. And there was huge excitement about it over here in Ireland and in the stone lifting community in general, because like Ireland had its first lifting stone. Because if you go into like these stone lifting maps, so like there's all these blooms of just like 30, 40, 50 stones in Iceland, 35, 40 in Scotland. You know, there's loads in Norway and Sweden and all the way across that longitudinal line, massive amounts. And like we had one, and I was just so proud. We're on the map. We have one, you know. So from there, then
what did you do when you found it there? Did you lift it?
Not a hope. I went over 4 weeks later with Jamie Gorian, who actually took me around Scotland. He was like, I can't believe that story is real, because I mean, he was aware of the story as well. Because he runs in those circles, you know. He's like, that's a beautiful story. I always loved it. So 4 weeks later, we went back out and we brought weighing gear and back down to the place again. Weighed the stone at 171 kilos, which is immense. You know, it's absolutely massive. I mean, it's bigger than any of the mainland Scottish lifting stones by quite a long stretch, you know. So it's the heaviest lifting stone in Ireland and Scotland at that stage. I was like, that's incredible. So I was thinking, like, it's just this outlier of a stone. It's massive. It's on the islands. But I mean, 171, I mean, because the heaviest stone lifted in Scotland was 130, and I was at the pin of my collar. It was really, really difficult to lift. But 170 is a fair percentage up from 130. So I broke the ground maybe about an envelope's width. And I was happy with that. That was it. And Jamie got the stone actually up to his chest, which was just an amazing lift. So I was like, if he can do it, fuck it, I'm going to do it, you know? So then I started the real training for this. And alongside of that, I started the real research, because like, if we have one, we have more. And sure enough, lads, as I kept the research going and as I kept digging, the more I kept finding. I was just like, just pulling on the thread of this. And it was just like this whole just damn burst of information. Everybody had forgotten about it. It was like this national amnesia. But once I started, I was the stone guy. You were the guy online. It was doing the research. Everyone started sending you messages then, you know, and it grew and grew and grew. And little did I think I'd get to 37 lifting stones found in Ireland now in 2 years, you know.
It was 31 last I heard, right? Okay, there's 6 more. Brilliant. I love it.
It's amazing. I mean, it's this whole cultural revival, you know.
Yeah.
You brought back a culture from the dead. You know what I mean?
What's great about this is the way you talk about it. It's in living memory, but nobody seems to tell anybody about it, because they must just think they've only got their one, and there wasn't a one over there, and there wasn't a one over here. And I've been telling everyone about this. Everyone, when I'm talking to them, I was talking about it at the weekend and stuff like that. And I'm like, all these stones are massive, because like you were saying about the Scottish ones are like 120, 130, 100 kilos. All the Irish ones are like 100. You found ones heavier, haven't you? They're like 170, 200, and they're huge. So the other thing I've been telling people, and this is like, honestly, I love this, and I want you to talk a bit about this if you will, because like you were saying, you go to these places and there's like an old fella sitting in a chair, and you go and have a chat with him, like a 90-year-old fella, and he goes, "Oh, yeah, my granddad used to lift that on a Sunday at the crossroads and all that sort of stuff." And I'm like, how, like, why don't you tell anybody?
I mean, do you know what it is? It's just been this whole reconnection. You know, it's been absolutely incredible, because you're going to, I've reconnected to Ireland more than I ever did in my life over the past 2 years, because I'm going to parts of Ireland that I've never been to before. You know, I mean, I live down the southeast. I'm quite happy in the southeast. It's a lovely place. I wouldn't travel too far away from it generally, you know, maybe go for a weekend away with the wife, or, you know, go somewhere with the kids. But I've been all over the country now. I've been to every county in Ireland. I've been to most of the islands off the west coast, and you're meeting the people and you're seeing the beauty of the place. You know, it's like, I can't believe I've never seen this before. You know, I'm going to like West Galway, and I'm going to up through Mayo, and it's like being in the Scottish Highlands. Then I'm going out to the islands, and they're like these bleak, like lunar landscapes, which are just absolutely incredible to see. And it's just been incredible reconnection. And like you said, you're going to these places then, and what you're doing is, a lot of the time, it is in living memory. You're meeting the last man who lived it. So, like, usually I will, over the past year especially, I just get a message from someone who say, "Look, I heard about you on XYZ podcast, or I saw you on the telly. I was talking to my granddad or my great granddad, and he said he remembers the men used to lift the stone down here. So he was like, would you mind coming up to have a look at it?" No, I'd love to come up and have a look at it. So then you're traveling up maybe 4.5, 5 hours of the country, and you're meeting this man, and you're meeting the old man then who has the stories. And, you know, they're welcoming you into their house. They're welcoming you into their tabernacle of their life. They're telling you everything about their past, the people who lifted it, the stories behind it, the respect that people got for lifting it, why they lifted it. And then he's like, yeah, I lifted it myself. And would you mind if I came down to watch you attempt it? And I'm like, no, I'd be absolutely honored if you did. And then you're going down and you're gathering a crowd. You know, I mean, there's times where I'm like, hold on a second, I want to tell my friends. So he's there, he's calling his old friends, and they're coming down the car. And they're like, or they're walking down from next door, and they're like, I want to watch this lifted. I haven't seen it lifted in 50 years. And you're going down then, and you're bringing that culture back. You're bringing those memories back to these people. And it's a beautiful thing. They're coming up. A lot of times these men just start crying. They're like, I remember how good that felt. I'd love to be able to do it now, but I can't. But it's great to see someone keep the culture going, you know? And you're the next link in that chain then. You know what I mean? You're reaching back into the past to these guys. Sometimes the man is there. Sometimes it's his great granddad lifted it, and he's the last member of the family. And it's just a beautiful thing. You know what I mean? It's if you can give these people like this joy again, if you can do that by the simple act of just lifting something off the ground. But I think you're not just lifting something like a stone off the ground, you're lifting a culture. You're lifting a culture from the ground. You know what I mean? You're unearthing, literally and fucking metaphorically, a culture by doing this. And it's not lost on me how important that is. And people are just telling me all the time, David, you don't realize how important it is what you're doing, do you? You know, I said, I'm starting to get that now. It started as a quite innocent journey, but people are like, you're bringing back a bit of culture that was lost. It was taken, or it was lost through, you know, the shit that's been going on over the past 600 or 800 years here. But so you're bringing something back, and it's just people have responded to it, and they've really, really enjoyed it. And that's why I think they've rallied to it so much over the past 2 years, because, I mean, you're appearing on TV, you're going on all these huge podcasts, you're going on these late night like interview shows, like there's this famous actor and there's this famous musician and here's David Keohan, you know. What?
Here's Indiana Stones.
What is going on with my life, you know? It just started off as looking for a really cool culture because I really enjoy the physicality of it, but it's become a hell of a lot more than what it began, you know. It's become a lot more than that, especially over the past 6 months. But how cool is that?
Honestly, I think I love it. I love it. I absolutely. I know you love it. Like, I'm not even doing it, and I love it. I love watching it. Why did it stop then? I mean, I've heard you talk about this. So as an English guy, I probably shouldn't ask you this question because I won't want to hear the answer, will I? But like, why did it? What happened to the culture? Because it's in living memory. So
Yeah.
it obviously carried on a little bit, but then it just stopped. And why do you think that is?
There's lots of different factors. I mean, like, I'm not going to sit here and bash England. I could, but you know, I mean, like the Moor, like the Great Famine, in the 1840s, would be one of the main factors. A lot of them had died out with that because of, you know, half the country died or emigrated in 5 years. So, like, there was that, which was like, you would think a lot of people left the country, or a lot of people passed away. So a lot of stories, a lot of culture, and a lot of history went with them.
I saw something about that. I saw something about that recently, and it's like the actual population of Ireland hasn't got back to where it was, has it?
No, not yet.
Nowhere near.
We're probably the only place in Europe actually that hasn't happened.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So look, I mean, I'm not going to get into that too much. You know, that happened. The culture was stripped. And like a lot of that happened 16th, 17th, 18th century. But like I said, over the past 100 years, I suppose the invention of the GAA over here, you know, it was something to do on a Sunday. So I mean, like the Gaelic games, the hurling and football, they became the thing that people done on a Sunday instead of doing the stone lifting or the stone putting, you know, or meeting at the crossroads. Then I was playing these games. Of course, modernization, urbanization, the leaving of the villages, the leaving of the West Coast to become, you know, to go to Dublin, to go to the East Coast. And a lot of these stones and stories are in the West. So it was a combination of many, many different things.
Do you think it's also like just a product of like the modernization of culture, you know, and the changing, you know, the changing of society. And I think that's kind of what, because back, I mean, if you can explain, you know, going back to, you know, hundreds, possibly thousands of years ago, where like I've heard in you know, in Scotland and things, it was almost like a test of strength in clans and things like that, and in villages to, you know, to almost become a man, you sort of like lift these stones, and it would be a test So obviously that's kind of society has changed a lot, and it's kind of and I know in Scotland you've still got the Highland Games and things, which kind of, but is that what were they? What was the original purpose of them, or what would they have been used for?
There's so many. I mean, like,
Years ago.
so like, I mean, some of the ones I found, especially up north, are in relation to the old festivals. So like the harvest festivals. So say like the festival of Lunasa. So Lunasa. So I mean, Lunasa is to do with the god Lu, the Celtic god Lu. So Lu's Nyasad would be Lunasa, and Lunasa would actually also be the Irish word for the month of August. So in the harvest festivals in the 1st of August, you would have Lu's Nyasad, Lu's assembly. So they would ascend to mountaintops or ascend to hilltops, light fires, dancing, singing, music, and sporting games. So this was all to worship Lu, the god Lu, and to worship the harvest, you know, pre-Christian times. So the lifting then of this stone, like I found one up in County Tyrone, and it's they said as part of the pinnacle of the games was to see who could lift the scalp stone, it was called. So they said they would have all kinds of dancing and merriment and fun up in the mountain. And I went up to this mountain, and it's like almost like a volcanic mountain. You come up, there's a rim, and then you come down into this almost like an amphitheater. And they said the people would line around and they'd look down at the games. And the highlight of the games was who could lift the scalp stone the highest. So, and you got massive social status for doing that. I mean, you got huge respect in these times, pre-mechanical times. You know, to be a strong person was to be a useful person. You know what I mean? If you were strong, people wanted to know you. They wanted to have you work for them. You were going to get a job easier. You were probably going to get married easier. You know what I mean? It meant a lot in these simpler times, you know, but tougher times. So whoever could lift a stone was like, you know, you're the cock of the walk. You're the head man in the village. You know, everyone knows you. So I went up to this place, and they said it hadn't been lifted since the 1940s. The festival, which went back pre-Christian, stopped again sometime in the 20s or 30s. But it was still in living memory for some of the older farmers there. So we went back up there about 6 months ago, with a couple of friends from Scotland. And they'd heard me on the Blind Buy podcast, and they were like, we'll meet you in this cafe, you know. So I went up to Tyrone, like long enough I've been from Waterford, like I'm down the opposite side of the country. I go into this cafe and it's ram-packed full of people. There's fucking loads of people in it. It's like, Jesus, this place is doing some business on a Saturday morning. So I was sat in and I got a coffee and sitting down, and in comes this guy, Dermot, who I actually was in contact with. He introduced himself. I am Dermot. And we were just chatting away, and I said, Jesus, said, this place is packed. Yeah, he said, they're all here to see you. Hey, this is the guy. You know what I mean? This is the guy. Everyone comes over, shaking your hand and fucking hugging you, and like, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming up. And thanks so much for bringing this back. Do you mind if you come up with you? And like, then there's journalists coming over, and there's cameras and all kinds of stuff. I'm like, yeah, whoever wants to come up, it'd be great. So half the village ends up going up the side of this fucking mountain. We go up and we find this stone. And they said, whoever could get, they said the wind under the stone, or could get light or air under the stone, was a hero. But if you could smig a, and smig a literally means, smig means chin, and a means it. If you could chin it, so if you could pick it up to your chin, you were a legend, you know? So I was like, right, I got to fucking do that. So the stone is like 150 kilos, and it's gabbro, so very, very dense and very awkwardly shaped. So the oldest farmer there was, I remember seeing someone lift it, he said, but they just got a bit of air under it. So I went over, and thankfully I've been training for a while at this stage, and got the stone up to my lap and got it up to my chin and put it down again. And they were just amazed, you know, they were absolutely delighted. They were like, old man was like, I thought I'd never see that in my lifetime. He was fucking delighted. And he was like, I can't wait to tell you going down the pub later on. So it was just, you've brought something back, and you've given people just this happiness, you know what I mean? And this pride in their locality. They're like, we have this here now. We have this here. People will want to come to it. People will want to lift it. And he said, David, he said, there's people phoning me every day now. He said, every day I've someone contacting me on Instagram or buzzing me, said they want to go and lift a scalp stone and see can they do it. Because, you know, you brought it back. You know, it's like, that's fucking great. You know, you're not just talking about a culture or just going out and doing it for yourself. You're actually bringing the whole thing back now. People want to come and do this, and people are now, you know, organising holidays to come to Ireland to lift these stones. You know, it's just, it's hard to fathom sometimes. I mean, I don't sit back and think about it a lot. You know, I just keep kind of powering forward with it. You know, that's the kind of person I am. But sometimes when you sit back and think, you're like, Jesus, I mean, it's been astronomical, you know, what's happened over the past 2 years, you know? It really has.
when we were in Belfast last weekend with Paul McElroy, and I think I messaged you and said that he'd been talking about you to everyone. He mentioned you and had been explaining what you do, and he had kind of
I think his exact words were, "There's this mad bastard down in down in Southern Ireland going around lifting stuff."
He said no, because he was talking about you from a GS point of view, and then he sort of said, and now he does this, and kind of explained to everyone. And because I don't know, you obviously will know more, but he kind of said that there's different sort of, obviously the stones are all different weights, so you're able to do different things with the different size stones. But he said that the first kind of level would be almost like you said, getting the wind under it or the light under it and just breaking it off the ground. And then the next level would be maybe taking it onto your lap and then getting it up to your chest. And obviously the final level of something, obviously you're not going to do it with like 150 kilos, but would be to actually maybe to manage to sort of overhead press something, and they're the different size stones you can do different things with. But that's incredible though, that that kind of getting it to your chin or getting it up on your chest to your chin was seen as like legend status, and you managed to do that. I mean, that's incredible.
That was incredible. Especially because like I wouldn't be the biggest of men, so a lot of times when I come to these places, these guys are expecting a monster, they're expecting a guy 6'6", big guy. I'm coming in at 5'9", and I'm like, about 95 kilos. Like, what the fuck is this fella going to do? You know what I mean? But then I think it's actually nearly more impressive then, because when you actually do it, and they're like, Jesus, he's not that much bigger than me, or he's actually smaller than I am. Fuck, I could do it. And it makes it more accessible for people. Because I mean, if I was a massive guy and I was just doing this, you were like, oh yeah, well, he's just huge. I mean, there's no way I could do that. But you're like, hold on a second, this guy's just a normal guy. He ain't exactly young either. I'm 45, So you're like, he can do this. I can fucking do it. You know what I mean? And of course he can. With a bit of training, of course he can,
Yeah, I think that's the thing, because for people who are just listening and not watching and haven't seen, I mean, we do share photos of you and stuff, so I'm sure people have seen. But for scale, like you expect, like someone like a Brian Shaw or a Hafthor Bjornsson or something like that, these huge, 25, 30 stone guys who are 6'5", 6'10", whatever. You'd think, yeah, they can lift that, but you're not. I mean, you're a solid, strong, stocky guy now, but you're not like you say, you're not a huge guy. So the strength that you've got for lifting stones. I mean, I know you train and I love the way you train with the stones, and then with the kettlebells piled on top of the stones as well. To really, I mean, is stone lifting strength something that's very, very specific? Maybe you can talk about the ruggedness because it's something so different that most people will never experience, or certainly never have tried to this point. I mean, how different is it? How hard is it?
I mean, it is difficult, of course. I mean, like, and I think we touched on it the last time, but it's like, even when you look at the top level athletes, those guys are lifting natural stones. When they're doing like the Arnolds, they're lifting natural stones up to about 180, 190 max, and these guys can almost triple that in a deadlift. You know what I mean? They can definitely double 2.5 times that in a deadlift. And you're like, these guys should be able to lift up something 180 kilos relatively easily. But a lot of them have a lot of trouble lifting the stone. A lot of them can't even pick the stone off the ground, the Bill Odden stone. Now, I've seen Kieliszewski, Matthias Kieliszewski is just an absolute animal on the stones, and he can shoulder that stone 4 or 5 times in a row in 90 seconds, which is just one of the most phenomenal feats of strength I think I've ever seen. But some of those guys can't even pick that stone up to their lap, and these are the strongest men in the world. And then you're thinking, hold on a second, I've lifted 225 kilos up to my lap. You know what I mean? And I'm half their weight, body weight wise. Some of these guys are up around 160, 170 kilos. But it just goes to show you, like, all I do is train lifting stones. So when you do that specifically, you can do some pretty fucking amazing things with it. These guys have to train a broad spectrum, whereas I just train lifting stones. So I think I could actually keep up with most of those guys when it comes to natural stone lifting, even at the age I am, even at the weight I am. But obviously, when it comes to everything else, I wouldn't have a hope. But that's because I train specifically stone lifting, and I've trained my body to use every fiber of my body equally when I'm lifting a stone. I'm not just lifting with one, like, you're not just lifting with your back, or you're not just lifting with your arms, you're lifting with your entire being. You know what I mean? So when you can utilize everything that you have, you can do some pretty amazing stuff, training at the back. I remember, like you said, I'm training at the back with stones. So I literally have a stone, like you said, I have a flat stone that weighs 90 kilos exactly. And I put kettlebells on that as almost like as a specific deadlift stone training day, you know? So on that day, maybe once, maybe twice a week, but definitely once a week, I will build up, and I'll treat it like a deadlift protocol, a deadlift program. So I'll have, like, say, 5 sets of 5 or 4 sets of 3, and then I'll wave that and scale that up. And I'll head for, like, say, I'm heading at the moment for 220 kilos. So I have like 48s and 42s and 36s and 28s and 20s. So I will just add those on. You know, I can fit 2 on. So I'm up to now putting on the 48, the 42 onto the 90 kilo, which makes it about 180 kilo. Is it 180 kilos? And I'm doing that for sets of 3. And people say, it's only 180 kilos, right? First of all, you're lifting from the grass. So you're lifting from the ground. You talk about a deficit deadlift, you're lifting from the actual ground level, you know, which makes it so much more difficult because you're bent over further. Like when you're a deadlifter like this, when you're lifting a stone, you're almost horizontal, you know. So again, you have to learn to use your hips and not just use your back, around your back. You learn to use your hips, drive the legs through the ground. So you're using a lot of, like, you know, hips, glutes, and back to lift it. Second of all, I'm training out in the mud. So I'm out in the mud, on the grass. So there's no grip. I mean, the stone is shaped oddly. So you're lifting sometimes using your wrist more so than sometimes you're using your fingers more so. I mean, look at the forearms have gone absolutely fucking massive. You know what I mean? But it's
10 kilos has gone onto your forearms, yeah?
it's just that forearm strength, you know. It's like, so then it's just pure grip strength you're using. So like you're gripping with your fingers, you're gripping with your wrist. So you're learning how, like, grip intelligence, which is fantastic. I think that a lot of the mace work I done really help with that. So you're and then you're out in all elements. It's wet, it's slippy, and you've got an awkwardly shaped object. So you have all of these things fighting against you, as opposed to just being in a gym, lifting on a barbell, which is calibrated with chalk in the dry. You know, I haven't tested.
that would feel. I was going to say that would feel like an absolute luxury now, wouldn't it? To go
really,
to approach a bar, approach a dry bar with chalk on your hands, and have it all just equally weighted up. That would feel like it.
At this stage, that feels like cheating. At this stage, to be honest with you,
you should do it one day and get a load of people to, like, throw things at you and chuck buckets of water over you and stuff like that while you're doing it.
I know. I mean, like, but it's because it's like that whole train hard and compete easy thing. And I was always into that anyway, especially with kettlebells as well. You know, I was into getting up at weird times of the night and training with, like, putting oil on the kettlebell handles, you know, doing mad things, just so, like, you can train really, really hard and put yourself in awkward situations, awkward parts, like training outside, training inside. So then when you went to a competition, it didn't feel difficult. It was like, fuck, I'm inside. I've got chalk. You know what I mean? This is going to be a piece of piss. And then that works really mentally as well. You know what I mean? Which is a massive part of it. So that really helped me with my kettlebells. It was like, I'll apply that to my stone lifting. So I just do all my training at the back. So then when I go on a tour, so if I go on a tour and it's pissing rain and there's mud everywhere, I'm like, I'm used to that. It doesn't bother me. You know what I mean? I know how to deal with that. I know how to adjust to that. So I've always been into that kind of mindset of train hard and compete easy, you know, and it's working.
So when you're lifting a natural stone, you've got to find the center of gravity and all that, or the center of mass and all that sort of stuff. So when you're training with bells on top of a stone, they'll presumably when you lift it, they move around. So then you've got to battle that. So then when you do actually go to lift a solid stone where it doesn't move, I mean, it moves in itself, but once you've got it and it's a bit more sturdy, then does it just make it so much easier to lift it then?
That's a good point as well. Yeah, it does. Because when you're lifting with the kettlebells, like you said, they shift about, they juggle a bit, you know what I mean? They move around. So then you're kind of fighting that stabilization as well. And especially when you're trying to, you know, pull something to your max, it makes it a lot more difficult. So like I said, then when you're going to lift one solid object, it makes that a lot easier. But yeah, it's just the training has been great fun. It's been really interesting because it's so different than what I was doing the last time I was talking to lads. I was just training kettlebells and yoga. I'm still keeping the yoga going, by the way. I train yoga 2-3 times a week. Not as much yoga specifically now, more the joint movements, you know, functional range conditioning, that kind of stuff. And that's really working for me well because, you know, when you're training lifting stone, you get yourself into some weird positions. You know what I mean? You get yourself into real deep squats. You know, you're almost like your sitting bones are on the ground. you've got a 170 to 180 kilo stone on your body. So you have to be able to be strong and mobile to be able to get up out of those kind of positions, you know? So yoga and mobility really, really helps. And that's a very, very important part of my training. I don't even call it training, to be honest with you, at this stage. It's just what I do every day. It's almost like
I've got to ask about, you know, some of the great videos that you do where you're on the beach and when you're on the beach, you're actually in the water most of the time, and the waves are kind of lapping up around you, and then you're trying to, you know, get this stone up, and you lift it, and the water must be freezing cold because you're doing it like right through the winter as well.
Yeah.
I think the water's freezing cold in Ireland in
well,
August.
it's probably freezing cold all the time, even colder. But I mean, that does the salt water and the sand, does that give you any kind of grip, or is the water just making it really slippery, and that's even more challenging when you're lifting wet stones in the water or on the beach or whatever?
Sometimes the water doesn't bother me for grip, because salt water especially, like there's usually little very tiny textural, you know,
particles kind of in. Oh, okay.
Stone.
Yeah.
So I mean, sometimes it actually helps with the grip, but the sand is the worst, because if you get like wet sand, it's just that, you know, it's friction. You know, you can't get a grip on it. So, but that's why like, actually lifting in the water is a lot easier sometimes, because like obviously there can be no sand attached to it, so you're just literally there almost in about like half a foot of water, and you're pulling that stone up. But then obviously then you get that extra weight because you're pulling it up through the water. So it helps with that initial deadlift movement as well. You know what I mean? So and of course it looks cool as fuck, which is very important.
That's what it's all about, isn't it? It's for the gram, obviously. I reckon. Do you wait? Because I bet you know the tide times and everything, don't you? You'd be like, oh, I can't go yet. Honestly, I'll go later on because the tide will be.
Honestly, at this stage, it doesn't bother me whether, you know, because I mean, it's not often I get to go. Maybe once or twice, maybe once every 2 weeks up to the beach, just because life has just gotten so busy lately, lads. I'm not getting as much time to do that kind of thing, but life has gotten very, very busy, especially over the past even 3 months. Stuff that you never thought would be possible, you know, at this stage of your life. Like there's documentaries being made, there's talks of TV shows being made. I've written the book. I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning for about 6 months and wrote for 3 hours before I went to work. And because I just needed to get the book out of me, because the stories are incredible and they needed to be told, you know. So like you said, you're meeting the last of these people and you're getting all these tales of ancient mythologies and histories and culture. So like I just wrote down everything that was in my head. I'm on my 4th draft now. I sent it off actually last week to a publisher over in the London Book Week, over actually the Soho agency. And he's very interested in it. He thinks it's great. He's talking to all his mates about it. So please God, that book will be out in the next 6 months, and we can share those stories with the world, you know, which is, to me, that's the most important thing, because the stories are just so good. People need to read them, you know. You wouldn't believe half them. I mean, and like, unless they actually happened, you know what I mean? It's like, that happened. Sometimes I'm coming home and these going, did that actually fucking happen? You know what I mean? That's just like magic. You know, you manage to find something. I think, you know, you managed to find a needle in a needle stack, you know, just through pure luck. And it's just, it's been an amazing amount of good luck in me finding these 3 dozen lifting stones in a culture that was dead, you know. It's just been incredible. So like I said, you have that, you have documentaries, TV shows, like going on late night TV, meeting Tommy Tiernan and going to the Tommy Tiernan show. That was just unbelievable, you know. Like I'm listening to that guy since the late 90s. I was like, then I'm just sitting there talking to him, you know, face to face. It was a very surreal moment. I
saw you do the was it like a breakfast TV one or something, or a morning TV where you had, and I think it was a former like Irish rugby player,
Tommy Bowe.
Yeah, he's presenting, and then you had the stones all laid on the floor, and he lifted some of them, didn't he, as well? And
that was hilarious because you picked one up and you went, yeah, nice little warm up there.
I had to sew it into him, you know what I mean? He's a big, strong lad, you know, but he was mad to lift him. So he's like, can you bring up some of the stones? So like, here I am in a car with a fucking 115 kilo shield stone beside me with that seatbelt on it. We're going like the saner people fucking locked up, driving up the motorway up to Dublin. But I had these 3 stones, we put them out there. Like I said, yeah, I mean, that's my 4th TV show now I've been on in the last 4 months. Like I was on Today's Show. I was on the one there with Tommy Bowe. I was on Nationwide, which was fantastic. That was the one we went over the English Moor. and we lifted that stone, the Nemo Flaherty stone. They came over actually with a film crew. That was fantastic. And then the late night like interview style show with Tommy Tiernan, which was just incredible. And people are still talking about it. I mean, that was released about 4 weeks ago. And like every third person that comes into the shop now was talking about it. They're like, "You're the guy on the show." I was like, "Yeah, it was me. Yeah, fucking love what you're doing. Keep going." You know what I mean?
I'm
gonna say,
I'm gonna have to watch the Tommy Tiernan one actually.
Are you still? You're still working in like it's like a building merchants, isn't it, or something?
It's still there.
You're still doing that full time.
So
Yeah.
like, but the way things are going, lads, and I never thought I'd leave there, to be honest with you, because I'm there so long. The way things are going, like we're applying for an academic paper to write an academic paper on this with Ulster University, Dr. Conor Hefner and a few others, and that'll be like applying for a large grant. So if that goes through, it'll be like, here's some money, go off and do the research and write a paper on this. I mean, that'll just be amazing. So between that, the documentaries, hopefully, like there's 5 mini documentaries made already. Some 8 minutes, between 8 minutes and 20 minutes long. So then we're applying into Netflix, into Hulu, into all these companies, HBO, to see will they take it up. And if they do, again, here's some money, go off and do it, you know, and then the book, you know. So there's lots of things on, there's tours planned. I'm thinking like for the first time ever, you know, in the last 20 years, I'm in that job. This could actually be a way to, you know, to make some money out of it, to do something that you love, and get paid for it. Like, wouldn't that be the dream, you know? So if it does, it does, you know. And I'm a firm believer in like what's for you won't pass you. So but I believe this is important enough that it will, please God, it'll happen, you know, because I think it deserves it, because it's such a cool tradition, and it's part of the whole Irish resurgence that's going on here now. There's a whole love for the nation that's come back again over the past couple of years here, which kind of wasn't there before. It was to a certain degree, but I mean, we were always like dirt poor. I mean, like, I remember growing up, like I'm like in my mid-40s, growing up, we had nothing, you know, we were poor, and you're almost ashamed to be Irish. But there's just this love back again for Ireland, for its mythologies, its history, its culture. The language is coming back, and we learned the language myself. And it's just hit at the right time, I think. You know what I mean? It's part of this cultural revival that's happening over here now. So I think maybe if I'd done it 10 years ago, maybe it wouldn't have landed so much. But I think just because of the landscape of where we're at now over here, that it's starting to take off massively. So
I was just thinking that from what you were saying there, the time, because I mean, I can't speak for how it's been the last few years in Ireland, but like, when you say it's kind of the right time, obviously there was COVID, and you just started lifting stones during lockdown because you didn't have a gym to go to and all of that sort of stuff. So it's like, and you said people were delivering stones around your house because they're like, "Oh, I've got this stone that I don't need. Do you want it?" And it was like, "Yeah, go on then." But I mean, there's two things I want to ask. So the first one was about the you were talking about the curriculum at school in Ireland for kids to go home and ask their parents and grandparents about history, and I think that is amazing. And I wish I could have done that. I mean, you know, I've only got one parent left, and my grandparents are long gone. But like, you know, that would have been. That's just amazing, because, like you say, there's so much history there. Because if you ask your grandparents something, say that can take something back like 200 years in that memory. That was one thing, and then the second one is, have you grasped how huge this is yet, or do you just will you never know? Because it's massive, isn't it? It's bigger than you can actually comprehend.
Bigger than like I said, I have had people, I mean, from every strata. I mean, I have famous actors, musicians, you know. I had Robert Sheen give me a text there a couple of days ago, you know, from the Umbrella Academy, and he's like, Band of Brothers and that kind of stuff. And he's like, "I absolutely love what you're doing, man. I can't wait for the book, you know. Keep doing it. You're fucking great." And sometimes, you know, if we're down in Cork someday, you might go lifting together. I'm like, "Okay, Mr. Robert Sheen, that'd be fantastic." You know, so but like, you're meeting people from every strata of society, and they're all saying, you don't realize how important it is what you're doing, you know. Maybe you do, you know what I mean? We don't mean to demean you by saying it, but I mean, you don't understand how much it means to other people, I suppose is probably the best way to say it. Yeah. So yeah, it's gone absolutely stratospheric. I think it's just the fact that people are saying, like, you know, you're bringing a bit of strength back. You know, you're bringing a bit of pride back. You know what I mean? I mean, we were beaten down for a long, long time, and it's like, you're fucking bringing back a bit of strength, and it's like, people are like fucking loving it, you know, they're loving it, especially the young men. I mean, I have young men come to me 18, 19. We went off on a stone tour about 3 weeks ago. I took them around the stones in Munster, and they were fucking delighted. I mean, these guys who probably never lifted in their life before, but they just got caught up in the whole vibe and loved the idea of it. They came out and they, like, we lifted the lightest stone together. They went down an awning, and they broke the ground with it. Maybe they got it like an inch off the ground, but the joy, you know what I mean? The pure, and the camaraderie, and, you know, they probably never played sport before. So just that camaraderie, you're giving that to people as well. That's wonderful. So like I said, yeah, it's hard to comprehend what you're doing, because it started so innocently as that would be nice to find, but now it's become something else. But like I said, with the kids, that's probably the best thing the Irish government ever done. Back in like the 1930s, the Irish government said, right, children, we're putting folklore on the curriculum for 3 years. Every Friday, here's a book. Every Friday, go back to your parents and grandparents and ask them about, and they give them a list of topics. So every week was a new topic. So it could have been medicines, or old cures, or old superstitions, battles, mythologies, you name it, right? But some of the headings were Dina Kailuda, which would be the local heroes or people of importance. So that could be, you know, singers, dancers, versifiers, swimmers, but also strong men and strong women. And the stories in Dukas are just incredible, you know, because they're written almost 100 years ago now at this stage. And maybe, like I said, as their grandparents who maybe in their 70s or 80s. So that's going back into the previous century. And they're saying, like, you know, a man lifted this stone at the crossroads and it was 300 weight, like 150 kilos. Or this man lifted this stone in this certain graveyard attached to the funeral games and it was 200 kilos. Or this stone was lifted up in Den graveyard and it was 225 kilos. This stone was lifted at this crossroads in relation to this sporting event and it was 210 kilos. And you're like, oh, fucking hold on a second. All these stones are absolutely massive. But what I loved about it was the kids wrote about it, right? But the parents dictated it to the kids. So it is the story that parents wrote, but it's written in this beautiful kind of childish way, you know? So you're following these stories that like a child wrote in the 1930s. And like, hold on a second. I'm like, okay, it's in this graveyard. So let's say the one I found up in Den. It's in Den graveyard. There was about 15 stories in Dukas about it. So it was like, there's a lot of stories. This has to be there to give a description of it. And it's in the old graveyard. So up I went to Den graveyard. And no one had been in the graveyard, I was told, in about 60 years. It was closed since 1938. And no one had been there at all. No one had cut the grass in 20 years. Because I met an old man at the church. I went to the church. I was actually looking for the graveyard. And he was like, no, it's not here. He said, it's a mile down the road on the right. But you do well to find that in there. I was like, why is that? He said, it's seriously overgrown. He said, doesn't, you know, the weeds are 8 foot tall. He said, you're not going to find that in there. And you have to be very, very careful of your footing. He said, because of the bodies kind of like, you know, sinking in the graves. It's very, very rocky underfoot. You know, you have to be very, very careful up there. So look, I said, I'm after driving up to Cavan, which is like almost 4 hours from my house. So like, I'm not going to not go. So I went down to the place and I looked at the fucking graveyard and the weeds are the height of the ceiling. Like, you know what I mean? And I brought no gear. I mean, if I'd have known what I was coming to this, I thought I was just coming to a neatly cut graveyard. I'll have a look around. I wasn't expecting like 8 foot weeds and briars and brambles and grasses and ferns. And you can't even see the gravestones because they're just, it's overgrown. So like I had a bill hook in the back of the car in the boot. If I knew I was coming to that, I would have brought like a lawnmower or something mechanical. But so I just started hacking in this graveyard looking for the stone. And after 2.5 hours, I couldn't find it still. Hell, I'm after cutting my way through this whole graveyard. Sweat, blood, stuff sticking to me fucking face, and mud and blood and thorns, and like, fuck this anyway. What am I doing here? The sign are locked up. But I was like, okay, look, there's only a small bit left. So I went up to the left-hand side of the graveyard, cutting, clang, hit something. And this what they described in Dukas was a 8-inch thick flagstone with a carved cross at the top of it. So I pulled back the ivy on this, and here, coming out from under the ivy and the clover, was this 7-8 inch thick flagstone with a carved cross on the top, and that was called the Flag of Den, which is a very famous stone that was lifted by the men after funerals. But also that stone was lifted. It was lifted after funerals. It was also a mass stone for when there was like the persecution for the British soldiers. They used to say mass in the graveyard on the stone, so it was an altar stone. And before that, it was a pagan cursing stone, which they used to, if you're strong enough to turn it over, because it's like 225 kilos. If you're strong enough to turn it over, you could lay a curse, almost like a voodoo curse against somebody. We used to call it laying a bishog against somebody. So it went from being a pagan stone to being an altar stone to being a lifting stone. And it was forgotten, lost. And it was written about 15 times in Dukas in the 1930s. It was like, this stone almost tells the history of fucking Ireland. You know what I mean? This stone should almost be in a fucking museum. And I was like, when I found it, I felt like something Indiana Jones. Because, like, do you remember when he was down under Venice and he finds the fucking, you know, he finds the tablet and the Templar cross, and you're now finding this stone with a cross on it and pulling stuff away. Like, fucking, that just doesn't happen now. This is like being in a modern day adventure story. And there it is. And like, the stone is monstrous. So like I said, they said it was 500 weight. So 500 weight would be about 250 kilos. I wouldn't say it's that. I'd say it's around 225, 230 kilos. But very big, very broad, and very thick, you know, so like a very difficult stone to lift. So I didn't even, at that stage, I was so knackered from cutting and looking for it, I didn't even attempt to lift on it. But I went back with the best stone lift in the world, actually, Sean Urquhart. He came over, I invited him over last summer. And we went and we lifted that stone together. I lifted it up to my knees and he lifted it up to his chest, which was just phenomenal. But you're getting all these mad adventures, you know, from it. All these really, really incredible stories. And people are phoning me up and saying, like, do you realize that you're on a modern day quest? You do know that, don't you? Like, yeah. Who gets to unironically say I'm going on a fucking quest? You feel like you're in a Tolkien novel after time. You know what I mean? You're just following stories, ancient cold cases written by kids, and there they fucking are then. You know what I mean? It's just, lads, it's some fucking buzz. That's all I can say.
So in the book, I can't wait for the book, I'll tell you. But and number one, the cursing stone, I thought you meant people who were like, for fuck's sake, this is really heavy. I can't move it. But,
they could have been saying that as well, because it fucking is it.
So in the book, is it, I mean, obviously there's lots of old stories in there. Are your stories in there as well?
Oh yeah.
Like
so, I mean,
stories like you've just told.
The book is literally every chapter is a stone. Like the running theme is the whole, like, you know, reclamation of the culture and getting stronger and bringing it back and meeting the people. But every chapter starts from the research. So say I maybe found a Dukas, so I'll give the Dukas story that I got and how difficult it was to find. Then it will be the actual looking for the place on a map. Sometimes that's actually hard because it's not even on Google Maps, they're so old. Then it'll be going to the place, meeting the locals, getting their stories. So getting, like, you know, the old men who are the old women who were there, who had lived in it before. Sometimes meeting the actual person, sometimes meeting their child or their great grandchild, and then hearing their stories. Then it'll be the actual finding of the stone. Sometimes easy, sometimes difficult, like the Flag of Den, having to hack it out of an old graveyard. And then it'll be the attempted lifting of it, how it felt, and then with the people there, how they responded to it, and just how pretty much how I felt then about the whole thing afterwards. So I mean, every stone has a chapter, but I mean, it's everything from the start to the finish of each one. Sometimes they're going back then to re-find it, to relift it after not being able to lift it the first time. But it's all the research, all the stories, all the tales, everything I can possibly think of is in it. And the guy I sent it over in London, the publisher, was like, he said, Dave, I was ducking out of my emails. He said, I was jumping out at lunchtime reading it. He said, to be honest with you, I don't say this to people, but he said, it's a fucking great book. He said, it's a great read. It's a modern day adventure story. He said, there's nobody writing this kind of stuff because nobody's doing this kind of stuff. You know, you're the only person I know of that's doing it anyway. So
it sounds almost like you could have like a TV series with, like, each stone could have its own episode. You know what I mean? And it sounds like it really kind of would lend itself to, you know, a half-hour, 45-minute show, you know, of all that, because you get these, you know, almost like, I mean, all these things like, you know, Antiques Roadshow and, you know, the repair shop and all this stuff. People love the history of things, you know what I mean? And it just sounds like it could really lend itself to something like that.
I mean,
incredible.
It's made for it. I mean, so that's what these guys are saying. These guys who were like the documentary crews, because like I've worked with 5 separate documentary crews now, and they're like you said, like, it lends itself to a show. You know what I mean? Like I said, each story. So they said, let's say series 1, you do 5, pick your top 5 in Ireland, and literally just follow the book and watch it done. You know what I mean? Meet the people. You met them already, and go and have a chat to them. And then series 2 could be, let's go abroad, let's go to Iceland, let's go to Norway. You know what I mean? And lift over there and meet the people over there and get those stories. You know, I can't see why it wouldn't work. I think it'd just be a really interesting show to watch, even just as a purely cultural thing. But I mean, it ticks a lot of boxes, like say, our culture, folklore, archaeology, history, mythology, strength, guys who like the gym, travel, landscape. I mean, why the fuck wouldn't you watch it? You know what I mean?
If you could do a few restaurant reviews while you're there as well.
Oh, the fuck not, that'd be great. And you love McGrub. I've had to eat a lot more lately, so yeah, that'd be brilliant. But yeah, I mean, it ticks a lot of boxes, and it'd be a really cool thing to do. So please God, one of these 5 documentaries, because they're sending them in, and what they showed me, lads, and one or two of them, like you said, one or two of them were actually, they documented me finding a stone, you know. So I mean, you get that whole emotional vibe of it. We found one up in Derry, and they had a documentary team with me when we found it, you know, and like it's a special moment, you know. So it's a really cool watch. So I'm looking forward to sharing those. I mean, they'll be sent off to film festivals, and like I said, hopefully into documentaries, and B, sharing the book and just getting the information out to people, because it is a very interesting thing. You know, of course I'm biased, but I mean, I think it's a really, like you said, I can't see why it wouldn't land, you know.
It goes even further than that for me, because like, to my mind, it comes up with like with when you go to the lakes and people use the Wainwright book to go and do all the Wainwrights in the lakes and what have you, because it's like, you know, he so this goes beyond you now, doesn't it? It's like you're the guy doing it. You'll have documentaries, books, and all that sort of stuff, and then in 100 years' time, people will be like, "I've got this book from this guy who lived 100 years ago, and we're going on. It's like a pilgrimage to find the stones that he found. It's there, then. It's in.
Exactly.
It's there.
It's in the social consciousness.
Written down.
That's it. It's there. It's, you know. So I mean, like, and I've heard that said as well, that, you know, you like, this will live way beyond what you're doing. You know what I mean? And people will say that's the stone that David Keohan lifted, because I mean, I have my testing stones or my lifting stones out in Benvoy, and now people are coming to lift those because I lift them. So they're like, I want to lift the stones that you're lifting. I see you doing it on Instagram. So now lads come from all over the world who want to lift those stones and put them in as part of their Irish stone lifting tour. And I always say, hey, look, you know, they're not historic. I said, they are fucking historic. You're lifting them. So like, in 50 years, in 20 years, they will be historic stones. Every stone story has to start somewhere. So like I said, that started with you. So I mean, and people will, please God, like, you know, it's nice to say, yeah, that set of stones that I've lifted and weighed and trained with for years, people will continue lifting them long after I'm dead. You know, it's nice to say, especially as you're coming into, like, you know, I've more behind me than I have ahead of me now at this stage, and you're like, you know, you're saying, you know, that's a nice legacy to be leaving. You know, you're leaving something greater than yourself, and you're like, you're raising a bit of culture. Like, and that's a wonderful thing to be able to do.
It's brilliant. I remember you. You put a story up about a lady lifting one of the stones or something like that, and Paul McElroy just said, like, "Do you reckon that's true?" And you went, "Well, we're Irish. We never let truth get in the way of a good story." And I just thought, like, I can imagine 100 years' time, they'd be like, "This David Keohan fellow was doing keepy uppies with this one."
He was 7'5" with a shock of red hair.
Yeah, hands. Yeah.
You know, I mean, so that's what I love going to these stones as well, because I mean, even that one, the Flag of Den, you know, I was researching it. Like I said, I had 15 stories. In 6 stories, it went from being like a 500 weight, which is like 250 kilos, to 600 weight, to 700 weight, to 800 weight. I was like, there's no man alive who can pick up 400 fucking kilos. What are you talking about? But it's that whole, it was so big that nobody could lift it, only this man, you know? So, I mean, like, there's always a kernel of truth in these stories, but you have to sift through, you know, the exaggerations, which, I mean, that's wonderful as well, because that's part of who we are. You know, I know as Irish people, that's a part of who we are anyway. We love adding arms and legs onto things. But then when you go to the stones and you weigh them and you lift them, that's the validation. We say, yeah, maybe they might have said it was 230 kilos. It actually weighs 195 kilos. That's still damn fucking heavy. And someone obviously did lift it because they wrote about it. So it's nice that you're going and validating these stories and, you know, almost peeling back the layers of, you know, adding arms and legs on it, which we like doing, but you're putting a validation on that person's effort, which is lovely.
Oh, it's amazing. I love it.
So, David, what's kind of what's next? I mean, obviously you've got these documentaries that have been made, and you're waiting to sort of see what happens with them. You're obviously on your, I think you said, like, your 3rd or 4th draft of, you know, going back and forth with a publisher in London for the book. I mean, have you found all the stones that you want to find and that you think you are to find in Ireland? Or is there more there that you're going to go for in Ireland, or what's the?
There's definitely another 2 so far. I mean, like, it just keeps rolling, that. So I mean, I found one 3 weeks ago down in Limerick. I didn't find it. Actually, a Limerick man found it for me. I tried to find it there a couple of years ago. I was at the wrong bridge. It's by a bridge. I was at the wrong bridge. It was 3 kilometers down the road. This guy found it under the water. I went into a river, pulled it out in the fucking river, and now it's back to be able to lift again. And there's 2 more stones up in Galway that are definitely there that I got photographs of and stories of. I just haven't got to Galway yet because it's a bit of a spin from here, but I've organised that for a couple of weeks' time. So I think the stones will always keep rolling on. The stories will always keep coming up as you get more and more notoriety, you know. So that we'll be up around 40 soon enough. But the coolest thing that's happened next week is there's a beer coming out around the Lifted Stones. A company up in the White Hag Brewery up in Sligo are releasing a beer, and they're like, David, we'd love to release a beer around the Lifted Stones. We love what you're doing. All their beers based around kind of Irish mythology and stuff. But said, like, you're almost becoming mythology at this stage, so we want to get you in on a beer. So I was like, that's a fucking great idea. Lovely. So like, what you think for a name? So it was like, look, the first one I found was called the Mullan, Mullan. It's easy to pronounce. That's fantastic. It'll look great in the can. It's 6 letters. We export half our beer to the Netherlands and to France and to Britain. And it's easy to pronounce. We make it a strong beer, obviously, and we call it the Mullan, and we'll release it in 2 weeks' time from today. So there's a beer coming out, and I said there's a little QR code inside. You can scan that, get into all of my socials, and like, you know, David Keohan, the Celtic Stone Lifter, and stuff on the side. And it's like, that's like the Irish version of a knighthood, so I'll take that.
So David, how do you spell that? Mull, did you say?
Mullan. Yeah.
Milan. Okay.
Milan.
Cool.
Yeah.
And what would you reckon we can order that like online? Could we, do you reckon, and get it?
I can't see why not. Definitely, because like I said, they export almost half of it. So and they do export a lot to Britain. So
okay.
So yeah, I mean that's just class. I mean, there's these really cool little small things like that. But I mean, the big things are the books, the documentary, the academic paper will be massive. I mean, that will be the first academic paper written on stone lifting in the world. So I mean, if that comes to pass, that could lead to a lot of other things. Oh, by the way, I forgot to say to you, I got a text 2 days ago from the TED company. They want to give me they want to do a TED talk in Tralee. So to do a TED talk is a massive honor. So like that'll be fantastic. And there's just, lads, there's so much. I mean, there's not a weekend, there's not a lunchtime, there's not an evening where I'm not talking to somebody. You know, I was talking to the brewery guys just before I came on. I was talking to Dr. Conor Heffernan at lunchtime. I'm talking to you guys now. Like, I literally have a diary that every single day this week I'm talking to somebody about something. But for me, it's a labor of love. It's about getting the culture back. And it's about bringing something, like you said, on greater than yourself. So I'm going to give as much time to this as I possibly can, ride the wave as far as it'll take me, and just keep enjoying myself, you know, because I love it. I mean, I absolutely love it. It's at the stage I don't want to be in work anymore. I want to be doing this, you know.
So it sounds like they'll end up being like a university degree on this and stuff like that. Like, no, don't seriously.
I mean, I was talking to the Iron Culture guys, Eric and Omar, about a year ago, and they came over and we shot a little mini documentary, the Iron Culture documentary. That'll be great. That'll be out this year as well. And Omar was there. Just keep going, man. You know, you're going to hit that culture at a different point. And at that stage, no one really knew about it. I was talking to you guys about it. I was talking to a few people, but it was still relatively small. You know, I'd found maybe 5, and he was like, "Just keep going, man. You will get that cultural." And I was like, "You don't understand, then. You don't even realize." No, I might, but I don't even know what that means or where that'll take me. But I think once I done the Blind Boy podcast last July, and that podcast dropped on the Wednesday, and it was like just a damn burst. It was like I went from like 4,000 followers or 5,000 followers on Instagram to like 16,000, 17,000 followers in 3 days. And people were just firing information at you. You know, probably got about 1,500 messages of stones, or people literally some people just send you photographs of rocks. Do you think this is it? No, lad, there's a rock out in your front lawn. You know, but every now and again you would get someone who had that bit of history and who'd send it on to you, and then you research it more. It's like, you know, yeah, that was there. That was mentioned the Dukas and stuff. So yeah, it went from very small to massive in the last 6 to 8 months, and it has been mentally jarring, and I'm not going to deny it. There's a lot involved in it. You know, you're spinning a lot of plates. You're talking to a lot of people. You know, mentally, then it is difficult to go back to work because, you know, you're back to just being your normal job again. But on your time off, you could be talking to absolutely anybody. You know, so it's been a weird dual life, and it still is a weird dual life. It's a weird double life, but there's no harm to keep your feet in the ground as well. So I mean, working in a job like that, a normal job, stops you kind of crawling up your own ass and believing your own hype, you know. So it's nice to be just doing your normal thing, but it's also nice on the weekends to be talking to all of these incredibly talented and wonderful people, you know. So yeah, I won't say it's the best of both worlds, because hopefully I want to do a little bit more with the stone lifting, but please God, it's starting to roll, and it's organically starting to grow so much. It'll be very interesting to see what happens in the next 12 months, you know.
It does seem that, yeah, like you say, probably, possibly, hopefully, you know, you won't be having this full-time job as well, you know, going forward, and you can dedicate more time to, because it sounds like you're pretty much doing 2 full-time jobs, you know what I mean? You've got your full-time job, and then with all the podcasts and the writing and the documentaries and the research and everything else, if you just kind of relieve the pressure of the work and had a bit of sort of, you know, like I say, financial stability and some money elsewhere, that you didn't have to do that. But I mean, this is, yeah, it's absolutely incredible. And it does seem like, I mean, especially something like America, you know, obviously I know you like Irish is so, Ireland is revered, respected. You know, there's a romanticism around Ireland, around the world, I think, like you said, and the way it's looked, and things like you say, rock stars, film stars, documentaries, TV, books. It's like you seem really close to this tipping point now, you know, where it's just gonna,
yeah, I mean, it's really starting to move. I mean, like I've had, and I won't name any names, but I had 2 pretty big American actors contact me as well, you know, which is really cool. Even just showing the wife, look, we thought of you. But it's like their grandparents came from Ireland, you know, and they're like, I just think what you're doing is really cool. And next time I'm over in Ireland, can I meet you? And maybe even possibly go lift these things together, you know, because like I'm from, like, my granddad is from Galway. He was a stone wall builder. So it's like, I'd love to go back and see that. And like, there's many, many Americans, I'm sure, out there who would love to come back and get in, like, physically in contact with their roots. If you're from a certain part of Ireland, like, generally there's a lifting stone there now. Like, there's one in nearly most counties now at this stage. I'm going to find it. So if you say, look, I'm from Tipperary, my parents are, my great grandparents from Tipperary, there's a stone in Tipperary that maybe your great grandfather lifted it, or maybe someone you knew lifted it, or maybe someone in your family lifted it way back through the generations. So it'd be nice then to go and look at it and put your hands on it, or maybe even try and lift it, and like, you're getting physically in contact with the past, you know. And I can't see why people wouldn't be enamored with that. I know I'm enamored with it, you know what I mean? And I'm Irish, lifting the Irish stones, and I'm sure the American people would love that. So I am going to try and organize tours as well, maybe 1 or 2 a year. Like, again, time is the thing really with me, but I'm definitely, I've one organized actually. So I have a tour organized, and we're going to say it to now, the 8th of June, the weekend of the 8th and the 9th of June. I'm doing a stone lifting tour of Galway. We're going to go one day in Galway and one day over to Inishmaan to lift the Malone stone, the famously Mufflarty stone. And the lads in the brewery said they'd sponsor an event, so they would probably sponsor drinks then and have a bit of fun, maybe a little bit of a festival thing almost over in Inishmore. So that's happening on the 8th and the 9th of June. So if people are interested in that, they're more than welcome to come along, give me a message, and I'll meet you over in Galway. And yeah, look, we keep it going, and we see how far we can go with it, lads. Yeah.
And do you, if you come on the tour, do you have to try and how you have to try and lift the stones? How heavy are the stones?
I mean, the stones, the Galway stones are pretty heavy. The Galway stones, you're talking anything from maybe 150 kilos up. So 150, 170, 185. The one over in the R9s is 171, you know. But I mean, a lot of the Irish stones is just to get the Guay it's just to get the wind under it. So even if you lift it an inch off the ground, that's a valid lift. And
maybe Pete and I can lift it between us.
I was going to, no, you'll be all right, James, because you're lifting 160 kilos on the bar at the minute, so you'll be fine.
Oh yeah, it's very different, like you said. Do me. I'll have to look at that. That's okay. And did you say have you got another one lined up as well, or is that the one that's lined up at the moment, the 8th and 9th?
That's the one that I've actually put out there. So that's we have an an American guy, John, coming over, who's fantastic. He's just back from a tour in Scotland, lifted the stones over in Houston, absolutely amazing stone lifter, only about 75, 78 kilos, one of the best stone lifters in the world, incredible. So I'm looking forward to meeting him. So he's coming over on the 8th as well. So I said I wanted to build it around him because he's coming all the way from the States to do this. So that's that weekend. And I said I'm going to do another weekend then down in the south. The stones are a little bit lighter. And we done that already. and it was a great success. So I think I'm going to do it again later on in the summer,
Mm,
sometime maybe in August or maybe in September.
mm.
And
Brilliant.
see how much time I have. So yeah, but I'll definitely keep you in the loop with that one, lads. If you're interested, it'd be great to have you along.
Brilliant. No, I would. Yeah. Well, we're getting used to spending weekends together now, aren't we, Pete? Oh,
We are, but we're also spending a week together in June as well, aren't we? Because we're in Cardiff. I can't remember
is
when that is.
weekend?
I think it might be, you know.
Oh, okay. We're at the UK's strongest man, aren't we?
Oh, awesome.
In Cardiff at some stage in June. I don't know what we. Well, I'll have a check. We'll have a look later on. So David, I mean, if people, I mean, it's great, and if you're going to start sharing these things like these tours of out in Ireland and things, which people will, I mean, it just sounds amazing to me. I mean, what if people don't currently follow you who are listening on the podcast? Is it Instagram? Is that the best thing for you?
Instagram is the best for me. I'm down as Indiana Stones on that. Up around 30,000 followers now. It's starting to really take off. On TikTok, it's the same name. Not as much. I find that platform is a little bit more. People aren't as fucking polite on that platform. I don't like it. Some white bastards on that platform. So no, Instagram is great. So pretty much follow me on Instagram, Indiana Stones. Or to look at this stage, and I don't mean to sound fucking boastful, type my name into Google, because you get so many podcasts. You get the GQ article that was written, the Art of Manliness podcast. You get all the stuff, all the information about me at this stage. So just type the name into Google and it'll all come up.
Yeah.
Have you Googled yourself?
I have, and it's mad. I Googled myself last night, and you come up as a person of interest. You know what, David Keohan, person of interest. And then you get all of this stuff, video, news, TV shows.
Have you got a Wikipedia page yet, though?
I don't know. I actually have. I have to have a look.
We'll have a look for that afterwards.
No, that's super.
It's mad because I mean, like I said, my life hasn't changed that much, in terms of day to day. But yeah, it's changed so much, virtually in 6 months. It is mad. But I mean, let's just keep it going because it's so much fun. And in your mid-40s, who thought anyone could have this kind of adventure? I feel like fucking Bilbo Baggins after that, to be honest with you.
No, this is great, and thank you so much. I know it's obviously you've been at work all day, and now it's we're recording this on Wednesday evening. It's about 7:30 in the evening, so we won't keep you any longer. But I mean, it's just so good to catch up with you again. I mean, we do. It's weird, isn't it, Pete? Because you when you follow people on social media and things, and you've spoke to them before and you've met them, you kind of feel like you're kind of in touch with them regularly. But when you think, God, it was 2.5 years ago that we last were on the podcast, it's just flown by. But no, thank you so much, David. I mean, that was a great. I mean, you could just feel the passion coming off of you. Do you know what I mean? When you talk, and I can't help you get excited, don't you, Pete? Especially hacking through the graveyard, and feeling that hearing that little contact on stone, and then it's there. It's just incredible. Yeah.
I mean, like, it's magical, and people have said it to me, David. You do know that magic is following you around, don't you? And I said, yeah, I've kind of started to believe that myself. So yeah, look, it's just been so cool to chat to you again. It's been, and like I said, it's been a while. You know what I mean? And we had great fun over at the workshop and stuff. So it was just great to chat to you again. As please God, we make this a yearly thing, and we see what happens soon enough. And
well, we definitely will make it. I mean, we definitely will get over to Ireland at some stage as well, and see you over there, because that would be an incredible trip. Yeah, no, that would be brilliant. Yeah,
I'll make a point of it, lads. I mean, like I said, these stone tours will be an ongoing thing. So I'll give you plenty of notice. So please, God, come over for one, and we'll drink a bit of wine and a few Guinness.
We'll make it happen. We were talking about doing it last year. Sean was like, "Shall we go over?" Like, I talking about going on holiday for a couple of weeks, and she was like, "Well, shall we go over to Ireland and you can pop and see Dave?" And she was up for it, and I would like bring the dog and everything. It was like, brilliant. So we might even be able to do that. Not this year because we've already put that, but. Yeah, anytime. It'll be great.
It'll be great. Look, you're more than welcome, and it'll be great. I'll make as much time as I possibly can, and we'll have a few bottles together. We're well overdue for you anyway.
I'm going to try.
Cans of Mulan.
I was going to say I'm going to try and find that new beer as well. The beer inspired by
when it comes out, I'll promote the shit out of it. I'll send you on a few. No problem at all.
I'm all over
that. Brilliant. So thank you, lads. Thank you so much, David. Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Lovely chatting. Long forward. Bye.
Cheers, mate. Take care. Bye. Oh dear. Well, that was obviously David Keohan there. That was incredible. That was great, wasn't it?
Oh, honestly, I feel great. after that. I really do. Wow.
Do me. Well, we will start to wrap up now. Like I say, David, very kindly, you know, after a full day's work, we've just been speaking to him, and God, he probably hasn't had his dinner yet. You know what I mean? He's probably going to go and eat now. But that was great. So thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Next week, I think what we're going to do is a bit of a debrief, a bit of a discussion around the weekend that Pete and I have just had with Dan John and Tim Anderson. So they were over at Unique Results in Chelmsford, and we had a fantastic weekend. We won't talk about it too much. I mean, we've been on for over an hour now already, so we won't start down that rabbit hole now. We'll do that next time. And also, I've got a new review to read out, which I'll do next time as well, and we'll give away some merch. So thank you so much for listening, guys. Hopefully, you've enjoyed that episode with Indiana Stones. And like I say, if you just type Indiana Stones 1N into Instagram, his account will come up. Certainly give him a follow on Instagram. But then if you just Google him, you'll see all the other media that he's been on, you know, the TV shows and the interviews and all that sort of stuff. And the like you said, the GQ articles and, you know, all the different podcasts he's been on from all over the world. So yes, please do like, share, subscribe, leave a review if you're listening or watching on a platform that allows you to do so, especially as we've found Apple Podcasts. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, leave us a review, and they do eventually get through to us. And like I say, we'll be reading one out next week. And we will see you next week for episode 194. We have already lined up Mr. Dan John for episode 200. So
a surprise guest, yeah?
Surprise guest for episode 200. I think that'll be his let. Oh, because they would have forgotten by then. They would have forgotten.
I'll cut that bit out.
No. Episode 200. Anyway, guys, we'll see you next week for episode 194, where unless we get a guest lined up, we will be discussing and debriefing all the stuff that we learned from the weekend we just had with Dan and Tim. Until next week. Bye-bye.